Imagine the walls rattling around you as the engine's roar drowns out every thought. The cold Atlantic spray stings your face, but it's the tightening knot in your stomach that's impossible to ignore. Around you, soldiers shift nervously, gripping their weapons like lifelines. 30 seconds, your captain yells. The sound of machine gun fire and the explosion of artillery shells shake you to your core. You're paralyzed, yet the big door in front rattles, about to drop open. What's waiting on the other side? A job to do, or death itself? The world hangs in the balance, but all you can hear now is the rapid thump of your heart. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everyone. Glad to see you again. If you enjoy what I do here, be sure to leave a like, comment where you're tuning in from, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Now, take a deep breath, relax, and enjoy this stroll through history. Why did the fate of the entire world hinge on this singular day? To answer that, we have to step back and look at the massive geopolitical chessboard of 1944. Nazi Germany, under Hitler, was tightening its grip on Europe. France, Belgium, Norway, Poland. All these countries had fallen under the crushing weight of the German war machine. The Soviet Union was pushing the Germans back on the Eastern Front at a horrifying human cost. But it was clear they couldn't hold that front forever without relief. The Western Allies knew they had to strike. Not just anywhere, though. They needed to hit where it would cripple German defences and loosen their grasp on occupied Europe. Normandy became that place. Now, Normandy wasn't the original choice. The Allies had debated where to land for months. Coastal regions across northern France were considered, with Pas-de-Calais being the most obvious target. It had a shorter crossing distance from Britain and was the most direct route into Nazi-occupied Europe. But that's what made it obvious, and predictable. It would be the first place the Germans fortified, and they had. So, the Allies did what any good strategist does. They picked the unexpected. Normandy, with its rugged coastline, wasn't the easiest corridor for invasion, but that worked in their favour. The Germans didn't see it coming, or at least not on the scale it arrived. Here's the thing though, even the best plans were teetering on a knife's edge. D-Day wasn't just about hitting the beach, it was about hitting it under the exact right circumstances. The operation depended on favourable weather conditions, synchronised efforts between the air, sea and land forces, and the Germans staying in the dark until the last minute. One error, one storm, one leak of information, and the whole thing would have unravelled. And failure wasn't just bad news for the Allies. If the invasion failed, it wouldn't just set the war back by months or years. It would have crushed morale across the Allied nations. It might have even given Germany enough time to deploy whatever aces they had hidden up their sleeves, including their V-weapons, those terrifying long-range rockets. So, the Allies spent months preparing and planning every intricate detail. The numbers on this operation alone are staggering, a scale almost impossible to comprehend. Nearly 7,000 ships, including destroyers, transports, and landing crafts, gathered off the English coast. That's not even counting the thousands of planes gearing up to provide air support or carpet-bomb German defences. Over 156,000 soldiers from the United States, Britain, Canada and several other Allied nations were poised to storm Normandy. Imagine seeing that many people all headed toward one long stretch of coastline. The sheer logistical nightmare of coordinating it is something that still amazes military historians to this day. If you think the Allies were the only ones scrambling though, think again. Hitler and his high command weren't oblivious. They knew an invasion was coming. They even knew it would probably target France, but probably doesn't cut it in warfare. The Germans launched a massive effort to fortify their Atlantic wall, building bunkers, machine gun nests and anti-aircraft defences along key beaches. Normandy didn't escape their attention entirely. Its cliffs were threaded with mines and barbed wire, and the beach itself was rigged to stop tanks from advancing. Still, German commanders were spread thin, trying to cover every potential weak spot. The beauty of choosing Normandy was that while the Germans fortified there, they didn't pour resources into it like they did with Calais, which had them distracted right up until the invasion. Picture it now, June 5th, 1944. Soldiers across southern England are eating their final hot meal before boarding their transports. These men have spent months training, not just climbing walls or practicing drills on beaches, but preparing for this moment in every way imaginable. They've been told where they're headed: Omaha, Utah, Juneau, Sword and Gold. That might sound like a relaxing beach holiday, but it's more like a trip into a heavily fortified meat grinder. They know their mission: secure the beach, push forward, and stop the Germans from rallying. What they don't know is how many of them will still be standing when it's over. Now zoom in for a second. Think of one soldier sitting to the side, helmet balanced precariously on his knee, while he waits for the signal to board the craft. He pulls a photograph from his pocket, one with soft weathered edges, the faces of his wife and two young kids staring up at him. He traces their faces with his thumb, knowing he might never see them again. The man next to him lights a cigarette, muttering about how this whole thing feels surreal, like some kind of nightmare dreamt up by a cornered general. A chaplain walks past, offering quiet prayers to those who want them, while others nervously fiddle with their gear. And then the signal comes. Everything is in motion now. Those who just moments ago were clumped together as nervous young men are suddenly soldiers gearing up for combat. Weapons are loaded, helmets are strapped down. The scale of this operation might be massive, but in this moment, all that exists is the steps from the dock to their cramped landing craft. Think about the orchestration here, how every ship, every plane and every soldier has to move seamlessly, like parts of some improbable machine. It's a feat of engineering, but it's also fragile. In the days leading up to D-Day, there's a storm, strong enough to threaten the invasion altogether. For a while, it's unclear if General Dwight D. Eisenhower will even give the green light. Finally, a weather report comes in. There will be just enough of a break to push ahead, and with that, over 5,000 ships begin cutting through the English Channel, escorted by waves of aircraft. But even as this massive armada pushes toward Normandy, it's not guaranteed to work. A delay in timing, a miscommunication in signals, or worse, discovery by the Germans, and it could crumble into disaster. All it takes is one alert German division to shift positions, one well-placed counterattack, and the beaches of Normandy could have become nothing more than a graveyard for Allied soldiers. Let's return to that one soldier for a second, the one clutching the photo of his kids. He's moving now, standing shoulder to shoulder with others who all carry their own fragment of fear. As the engines rumble to life and the landing craft begins to push off from ship, he looks back one last time at the shoreline disappearing behind him. There's no turning back now. Ahead, there's only the open sea, the distant thunder of German artillery, and that long, unbroken stretch of French coastline. The hours tick by. Every individual soldier is filled with their own thoughts. The gentle sway of the craft doesn't help, nor does the spray kicking up from the ocean. And yet, there it is. The faint shadow of land emerges through the mist, bringing with it the oppressive reality of what comes next. This isn't training. This won't go according to plan. The landing craft is packed. There's barely enough space to stretch a leg, much less pace, or get some relief from the tension. Salt water mixes with the smell of oil and sweat. The anticipation crackles like static in the air, growing heavier the closer they get to the shore. No orders matter at this point. There's nothing these men can do except wait for the moment they're told to storm forward. That moment is minutes away, and when it arrives, chaos is sure to break loose. You're in the landing craft now, standing shoulder to shoulder with men you've trained with for months. Some of their faces you know well, guys you've shared cigarettes and bitter cups of coffee with, men who laughed nervously whenever the conversation turned to home, to the people waiting for them. Others you've barely spoken to, yet here you all are, packed together so tightly you can feel the rise and fall of the person breathing next to you. No one knows who will still be standing in a few hours, and that realization eats away at the silence. The air is thick with salt and engine fumes. Oil clings to everything. The floor, the steel walls, your boots. Each wave that hits the craft sends another spray of icy water over the side, soaking socks, helmets, and hands that desperately try to keep weapons dry. A few men whisper prayers, heads bowed, lips barely moving. The rest just stay quiet, retreating into their own thoughts. Maybe they're picturing home. Maybe they're just counting seconds. More than a few glance at those small pieces of paper tucked into their pockets or shirts, letters from wives, a kid's drawing, or a faded photo of their family. These aren't just reminders of the lives they left behind. Right now they feel like anchors. One guy grips a rosary so tight his knuckles are white, silently mouthing the words to a prayer he's repeated since he was a child. Another keeps his eyes closed completely, breathing in long, slow bursts like he's trying to hold himself together. You hear a soldier shifting next to you, muttering under his breath about how this whole enterprise seems impossible. What chance do we have? Nobody answers. What's there to say? He's not wrong. At the back of the craft, the engine hums loudly, sending vibrations up through the steel floor. It's the kind of hum that doesn't let you relax. It keeps you awake, alert. Every soldier here feels it in their boots, like the boat itself is alive and restless. The vibrations travel into your bones, a constant reminder of the forward momentum that feels entirely out of your control. You squeeze the grip of your weapon just to keep your hands from shaking. The cold metal sends a harsh chill through your fingers, but it's grounding. Every man in this craft has been briefed about the plan, drilled until the objectives were so burned into muscle memory it became instinct. Still, the truth is no one really knows what's waiting out there. That lack of knowledge, that grey area, that blindfold before the drop feeling, it's what gnaws at you most. The officers told you about the beach, the defences you might face. They explained where you'll disembark, where you need to move next, and what targets to take out. They showed maps with coordinated strikes, arrows, and neat little numbers that made it seem just manageable enough to believe in. But there's a gap in everything they've told you. A massive chunk of what-ifs that none of the polished briefings ever filled in. What if the intel is wrong? What if the landing crafts don't make it through the naval artillery? What if the Germans are better prepared than anyone thinks? That's the thing. Half the battle is fear before the fight even starts. Then there are the sounds, the booming percussion of artillery shells in the distance, each one shaking every nerve in your body. You're not even on the beach yet, and the noise already makes it feel like you're in the thick of something massive and overwhelming. It's muffled now, but every few seconds the snap of distant machine gun fire cracks through the fog like a warning shot. You try not to think too hard about those bullets, the ones meant for you. Easier said than done. The craft rocks harder now as waves crash against the bow. Somewhere further along the line of boats, a soldier vomits over the side, retching loudly into the ocean. Someone whispers, "Hope we're not next to him when the ramp drops." The rare flicker of humour doesn't break the tension. If anything, it tightens it. Ahead through the salty haze, glimpses of land emerge like a mirage. The coastline doesn't look welcoming. It looks like a jagged, dark scar on the horizon. "Keep your heads down," someone shouts above the noise, as if you needed the reminder. The craft's steel walls feel thinner now, less protective, as though the bullets waiting ahead could punch through them any second. The chaplain stands near the front, gripping the frame for balance, his voice barely audible over the rumbling engine and crashing sea. "Heavenly Father," he begins, quieter than most can hear. A few soldiers mumble, "Amen," without lifting their heads. One soldier checks his rifle for what must be the 5th time, pulling it close to his chest like a lifeline. Another quietly mutters something to himself. His kid's name, maybe. It doesn't matter whether anyone can hear him. He's not talking to them anyway. Across the craft, another young man reaches into his worn jacket and pulls out a dog-eared slip of paper, slowly unfolding it with shaking hands. His lips move faintly as his eyes scan the words, reading a letter from someone who still believes he'll come home. Maybe that's his strength right now, pretending he believes it too. You don't have the heart to tell him that believing might not be enough. The closer you get, the louder everything becomes, the shells, the engines, the distant whine of bullets slicing the air ahead. The ramp in front of you rattles with every impact. It all feels too soon. You're not ready. How could you be? But the order's coming. The officers aren't giving you time to second guess or freeze up. The craft jolts, lurching forward in a sickening motion that nearly knocks the line of men off balance. It slows just enough to make everything tense. You clutch the side of the craft instinctively, teeth clench so tight they ache. 10 seconds! The shout cuts through the growing chaos like a blade and everything slows. You look around, catching fragments of faces, eyes wide with terror, jaws clenched in grim determination. Heads bow slightly. Just an unconscious attempt to make themselves smaller, to disappear into the chaos that's about to erupt. It's a strange moment, a fragment of calm held together by nothing but the fact that the ramp hasn't dropped yet. But there's no peace in it, only anticipation. Your heart pounds so hard you swear it might drown out the shouting. Hands tighten on weapons, knuckles whiten around grips and straps. The boat comes to a grinding stop, rocking violently as more waves pound into it. The ramp clamps, the bolts squeal as it begins to lower, and suddenly the floodgates open. Noise, light, chaos. The ramp slams down, hitting the water with a heavy metallic crack. For a brief second, the chaos outside feels like it rushes in all at once. Light, sound, death. In front of you, the first men step forward, and almost immediately bullets cut them down. They collapse before they even make it out of the craft, their bodies blocking the way. The air fills with shouting, screaming, and orders lost in the deafening roar of machine gun fire. You want to move, but your legs feel like they're locked in place, frozen by sheer terror. A barrage of bullets ricochets off the metal sides of the craft, and your brain finally catches up. Staying here means you're a sitting duck. Men are already screaming for cover, throwing themselves into the water to escape the slaughter. but stepping out feels like walking into the maw of hell itself. The soldiers in front of you who push past aren't lucky either. One stumbles over the side, falling into the water with a splash, gear and sheer panic dragging him under. Another tries to follow but crumples as a bullet tears through his chest mid-step. Blood sprays in a sickening arc, disappearing into the churning waves. The second you step forward, cold water rushes over your boots, slamming into your shins. Everything's moving too fast, too loud to process. A man on your left clutches his helmet with shaking hands as a mortar explodes nearby, the concussion ripping through the air. You feel it, like a punch to your chest, like the world's being torn in two. On your right, someone collapses face first into the sea, leaving only another red stain in the frothing surf. And with every second that passes, the reality of the situation becomes clearer. The beach isn't a beach, it's a death trap. Ahead of you, the beach stretches out in nightmarish detail. Men are scattered everywhere, some charging forward, others pinned down or completely motionless. The surf runs red around bodies floating face down in the water. The sand is pitted with craters, shredded by artillery and bombs, and dotting the landscape are the obstacles they warned you about back in training. Massive steel X's meant to shred landing crafts and boats, barbed wire like coiled snakes waiting to cut through anyone dumb enough to get too close. Everything is designed to kill you. And hiding up above, entrenched into the bluffs, are the German defenders. They've got the high ground, perfectly positioned to see every inch of your approach. Their MG-42 machine guns spit out thousands of rounds per minute, raking the beach with firepower so fast it feels like the very air is being carved apart. Concrete bunkers peer down like impenetrable fortresses, each one housing gunners who pour bullets into anything that moves, and this isn't even the full story. Landmines litter the sand, waiting to explode under a single unlucky step. Mortars drop from the cliffs above, sending shrapnel raining down like steel rain. It's all designed for one purpose, to keep the beach exactly the way it is, uncrossable. What's worse is that it's working. Men who've made it out of the craft are diving for whatever cover they can find, if cover even applies here. A shallow hole in the sand might buy you a second or two before the next volley. Others hide behind the twisted remains of tank traps, or the bloated still forms of their fallen comrades. You spot one soldier dragging himself out of the water on his elbows, his legs trailing uselessly behind him. His screams are drowned out by the gunfire, though you can still see his mouth wide open, pleading for help that nobody can give. Still, some manage to keep going. You don't know how or why, but they do. Maybe it's willpower, maybe it's instinct, maybe they just don't want to die without trying. A young soldier ahead of you, no more than 19, scrambles on all fours, hugging the ground as bullets chew up the sand behind him. He's shouting something, orders maybe, or just sheer desperation, but it's impossible to hear over the noise. That noise, it's never ending. You've heard loud things before, thunder, planes, even the artillery during training exercises, but nothing could have prepared you for this. It's not just loud, it's overwhelming, like sound has become a physical force, as if it's hammering down on you just as hard as the bullets and shrapnel. The boom of mortars, the whistling scream of artillery, the metallic rattle of machine guns. It comes together in a symphony of horror that you can feel in your chest, in your teeth, and yet there's no stopping. At least not if you want to survive the next 5 minutes. A soldier next to you grabs your shoulder and yells something, maybe move, or get down, but you don't have time to ask. You both run forward, sprinting through the chaos as the world seems to explode around you. Behind you, the landing craft that brought you here takes a direct hit, splitting into a fireball of oil and shrapnel. There's no going back. All that's left is forward. Your feet hit sand, slipping as you stumble toward what little cover lies ahead. Men hesitate, crouched low as if willing the bullets to miss them. Others don't hesitate at all. They leap over barricades, trip on the uneven ground, and keep crawling forward with mouths set in tight, grim lines. For some, hesitation is enough to cost them everything. One man, a private probably younger than you, freezes just a few steps off the boat. He's standing upright, completely exposed, as if he still can't believe this is happening. He doesn't last more than 2 seconds before a bullet rips through him. He crumples silently, face first into the sand, his helmet rolling off beside him. You drop behind a twisted metal girder, sharing the small space with another soldier whose face is pale and caked in mud. He clutches his weapon, but his hands are shaking so badly it's clear he's barely holding on. "What now?" he asks, his voice hoarse and cracking. You don't have an answer for him. You don't even know if there is one. Finally, ahead of you, a pocket of men begins to press forward, crawling, running, dragging one another past the obstacles in their path. Somehow they claw their way toward a sliver of hope, crammed shoulder to shoulder against a chunk of cliffside that shields them from the worst of the gunfire. It's barely enough room for everyone, but they keep coming, gasping, bleeding, trembling as they huddle together. For the first time since leaving the craft, you can breathe without feeling a bullet inch from your skin. But it's short-lived. The seawall, the steep bluff just ahead, looms like an impossible climb, and the Germans aren't going to stop shooting just because you're out of direct sight. One of the soldiers huddling beside you wipes blood. Someone else's from his eyes, gripping his rifle tightly. "We've got to keep going," he mutters. Not like there's another option. All you can do now is push forward, step by step, inch by inch, through whatever nightmare comes next. You're face down in the sand, chest heaving against the rough grit as you try to catch your breath. A machine gun opens up somewhere above, raking the beach with deadly efficiency. The rounds don't just whistle, no, they punch through the air, cutting it to ribbons just inches above your head, and every instinct you have is screaming at you to stay put. But staying here too long isn't an option. This patch of sand won't save you. It won't save anyone. You have to move. Somehow. You lift your head just enough to see the chaos ahead. It's hell, pure and simple. The beach stretches out wide and open, with almost no cover other than the occasional patch of jagged debris or a body lying still in the sand. The seawall, barely visible through the smoke choking the air, feels impossibly far away, like some faint glimmer of survival taunting you on the horizon. Between here and there, the killing zone yawns wide open. It's not just the gunfire from the bunkers tearing into anyone who dares to cross it. No, it's the mines, the barbed wire snarled into dense, sharp-packed walls, the wooden stakes angled to stop tanks, and the ever-present threat of mortar shells dropping like death's hammer from above. It's happening all around you. Soldiers crawling, staggering, dragging themselves closer to that seawall, only to drop one by one. Some freeze, trying to bury themselves into the sand, hoping to disappear. Others go limp mid-run. And then there are the ones screaming, not words, just primal screams as they clutch at wounds they can't even see through the blood soaking their uniforms. A few lie utterly still, faces half buried in sand pools turned dark by the tide. The air is thick with acrid smoke and the acidic stench of burning fuel from a landing craft still smouldering behind you. A soldier's body slumps over one of those big steel X-shaped obstacles littering the beach, his gear tangled in the metal. You see a medic, not just moving, running, across this nightmare landscape, pulling the wounded soldier off, all while crouched to avoid the constant stream of bullets from the cliffs. The medic doesn't get far. He hoists the now conscious man onto his shoulders and stumbles, tripping on loose sand as a sniper's crack echoes faintly in the distance. He drops. Both drop. One doesn't get up again. You're moving now, too, not by choice but because your body refuses to let you stop. Every nerve screams at you to keep crawling, to press yourself flat against the cold, damp earth and inch forward. The men around you do the same. No one runs upright anymore, not unless they're forced. You grab onto the jagged edge of a girder stuck in the sand, pulling yourself forward in short bursts, like a swimmer trying not to drown. Someone to your right is crying out for his mother, his voice barely audible over the deafening roar of machine guns and explosions. Your fingers scrape against something sharp, barbed wire, tangled and rusted, ripping the fabric of your sleeve and snagging your skin as you pull away. It's strewn across every pathway to the wall, a deadly barricade meant to stop anyone from advancing. But they don't stop. One soldier, barely older than a teenager, takes a pair of wire cutters, shaking in his hands, and starts slicing through, inch by agonizing inch. Each snap of the wire sounds almost insignificant compared to the chaos around him, but to those crawling behind, it's the sound of progress, of hope. He doesn't stop. Even as a bullet grazes his helmet hard enough to spin him sideways, he stumbles but keeps cutting. To your left, another pair of soldiers drags one of their own, his leg mangled beyond recognition, hanging limp in a way that makes your stomach twist. They use a bit of twisted wood as a makeshift stretcher, pulling him forward agonizingly slow, inch by bloody inch. Your mind screams at you to help, but your body stays low, locked in its fight for survival. Leadership becomes the only thing holding this chaos together. A lieutenant, face smeared with grit and blood, waves at you and the scattered cluster of men around him. "On me!" he shouts, vaulting over a chunk of twisted metal. Bullets snap inches from his face, but he doesn't falter. He's reaching back to pull another soldier to his feet, dragging him forward toward a patch of rough ground that offers a sliver of cover. Somehow, seeing him move reminds you what you're supposed to do. Keep going. Training kicks in next. It's almost absurd, but those endless hours of crawling through mud, memorizing how to move under fire, they matter here. You watch the men around you fall into rhythms, each movement deliberate. Some stop to lay suppressing fire at the cliffs, absolute suicide, but it buys time for the next wave of soldiers crawling forward. You see the platoon respond almost like clockwork, working as one even though their fear is painted on every face. None of this should work. On paper, this beat should be littered with nothing but failure, but slowly, impossibly, they're getting closer. Groups of men are starting to reach the seawall now. It's uneven, barely tall enough to hide behind in some parts, but it's cover. A soldier collapses against it, chest heaving, his helmet gone and his face streaked with mud and blood. One hand grips his rifle so tightly you can see the tendons in his fingers straining even from a distance. He glances back the way he came, watching others still crawling through the killing zone, and for a moment, just a moment, you see relief in his eyes. He made it. That's when he starts yelling, waving for the rest to push forward, no matter how impossible it seems. It's still pure chaos behind that line. Shells continue falling with a savage rhythm, cracks of sniper fire picking off anyone unlucky enough to pause too long. But now, for the first time, groups of soldiers are beginning to regroup, catching their breath against the seawall. Some share quick, frantic words of encouragement, slapping each other's shoulders while others reload their weapons with trembling hands. A sergeant nearby grabs a handful of grenades from his belt, yelling at his men to prepare for the next step. "We didn't come this far to sit here." His voice cuts through the noise. His tone leaves no room for argument. Around him, soldiers start steeling themselves, one lifting binoculars to scan for breakpoints in the German defences. The seawall itself is rough and pitted with holes from where stray shells hit. But to the men huddled against it, it's a lifeline. They finally dare to look up, just barely, scanning the cliffs and the bunkers looming above. They're battered, soaked, their uniforms caked with sand and ash. Yet somehow, despite everything, there's this flicker of something in their faces, a determination that wasn't there 20 minutes ago when they were climbing off the landing craft. Huddled behind the seawall, you feel the shift too. Survival doesn't just seem possible now, it feels necessary. This isn't over yet. There are still bunkers, barbed wire, and reinforced cliffs above. But for the first time since it began, forward no longer feels impossible. It feels inevitable. What makes a person get up and run toward a fortified machine gun nest when survival feels like nothing more than a distant rumour? Standing at the seawall, staring up at cliffs that seem to spit fire from every direction, you start to see it. Hope is mounting. Not because the odds have changed, but because some men choose to act when it feels impossible. And somehow, those few acts, desperation, bravery, instinct, whatever you want to call it, they start to turn the tide. Take the obstacles scattered all across the beach. Barbed wire, wooden stakes, tank traps. These weren't just nuisances. They were death sentences for anyone caught lingering. Somebody had to clear them, and that task fell to demolition teams, who might as well have been holding targets on their backs. Guys like Sergeant Harrison Summers, who ignored the machine gun fire slicing through the air to lead a team forward. The Germans had fortified a series of bunkers that ran along one critical path, forming a stronghold. Summers didn't hesitate. He broke from cover, running straight into the open with explosives strapped to his back, darting from one fortification to the next like it was just another obstacle course in training. He cleared several of these strong points in a single burst of action, paving the way for soldiers pinned behind, not through orders but sheer determination. Even Summers admitted later that fear didn't disappear. "I was scared to death," he reportedly said. But the objective wasn't going to take itself. Then there were the medics. If you think heroism comes with a rifle, you weren't paying attention to the men carrying nothing but stretchers and Red Cross patches. Think about this for a second. Charged with saving lives, medics didn't have the luxury of hiding behind cover or waiting out the gunfire. Their missions required them to do the unthinkable, run directly into an open hellscape of exploding mortars, flying shrapnel, and relentless gunfire. These weren't soldiers who lived for adrenaline. They were simply doing what they were trained to do, and most of them didn't expect to live while doing it. Stories of medics pulling wounded men off the sands read like something out of mythology, down to the moments when they threw themselves over injured soldiers as living shields. Audie J. Murphy, who served later in the war, described watching medics and said, "It took real guts to do what they did. I thought I knew courage until I saw that." Let's zoom in on Omaha Beach. The German defences were brutal to say the least. pre-sighted machine gun nests that overlapped in coverage, meaning every inch of sand could be hit at any moment. This wasn't random. It was planned specifically to mow down soldiers trying to advance. And yet advances were made, inch by painful inch, as men stretched their courage to the breaking point. Take Private First Class Gino J. Merlee. He wasn't supposed to make it through the day. He was briefly knocked unconscious by a blast, and when he woke up, he was pinned in a shallow crater with a group of other soldiers. Rather than stay down, he broke for the next piece of mangled cover, screaming for others to follow. They didn't. They thought he was crazy, but his mad dash dragged enough fire away from others that a small group finally pushed forward. Merlee's impulsiveness became the spark. But here's the thing. Heroism wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it looked like one man hauling a comrade over his shoulder, step after agonizing step, despite every rational part of his brain screaming at him to leave the guy and save himself. These weren't moments made for movies. They were messy, unscripted, and, more often than not, unnoticed except by those who felt their ripple effects. Like Private John Steele, stuck on the beaches and tangled in his own gear. He didn't save the day in the traditional sense. He merely broke free and kept pressing forward. But his actions inspired the three men with him, who'd been too paralyzed to take another step until they saw him get up. And what about men who faced such slim odds that logic said to just stop? Take Brigadier General Norman Cotter, one of the oldest men on the beach that day, who did exactly the opposite of what you'd expect from a general. He led from the front, helmet pulled low to deflect the shrapnel scattering in all directions. When his troops hesitated to move through a gap, he didn't hesitate himself. Gentlemen, we are being killed on the beaches. Let's go inland and be killed there. It sounds mad, but it worked. His sheer defiance against fear got soldiers moving again. First in ones and twos, then in chaotic, determined waves. By this point, something had changed. Incrementally, yes, but undeniably. The gunfire ripping across the sand didn't feel as relentless as it had just hours before. Some bunkers were silenced one by one through sheer grit and grenades. Small groups of soldiers were regrouping, crawling through the barbed wire and sharp stakes, their numbers still terrifyingly small but steadily growing. The tide wasn't turning because the Germans suddenly gave up. It was turning because every single act of courage, no matter how reckless or desperate, added up to something bigger. One machine gun nest cleared meant dozens of men could advance. One medic pulling someone to safety meant another rifle pointed back at the Germans. One standout example among the Allied forces was Lieutenant Colonel James Rudder and his elite troops from the 2nd Ranger Battalion sent to scale Point du Hoc. These cliffs, nestled between two key beaches, housed German artillery that could have torn entire divisions apart before they even reached land. The Rangers arrived under fire, climbing the nearly vertical cliffside with ropes and grappling hooks. Reaching the top alive was improbable enough, but they were greeted by Germans hurling grenades down at them. Rudder led his men in an assault that, against all reason, succeeded. Clearing out the stronghold gave the troops below a fighting chance to push deeper inland. And don't forget, their courage wasn't isolated. It bled through the ranks. When news of the Rangers' success reached soldiers pinned on the beaches, it acted as a lifeline. If they could hold on to those cliffs, surely the beach could be crossed. Acts like this sent ripples of hope across the battlefield, driving the men who just hours earlier thought they'd only survive by luck. Momentum is a strange thing in battle. It doesn't arrive all at once. It builds, piece by painful piece, until the balance tips just enough. And now, that tipping point felt closer than ever. The Allies were finally breaking through positions that intelligence had marked as impossible. Harrisons were leading charges, Kotas were shouting orders. Medics like Private John "Doc" Bradley ignored their wounds to save others, knowing full well their odds of survival were almost zero. Somehow, against overwhelming odds, the impossible was starting to feel inevitable. The battle is over, or at least it feels over. The gunfire that once ripped through every inch of the beach has gone quiet, replaced by the low hiss of smoke billowing from craters and the distant crackle of some flame still clinging to the wreckage of a landing craft. You almost can't process the silence at first. It feels wrong, incomplete, like the air itself is holding its breath. Across the sand, scattered in brutal clarity, are the remnants of everything it took to win this stretch of coastline. Broken equipment, shattered helmets, twisted metal, and everywhere you look, the still forms of soldiers who won't be rising again. It's not just the ones who are lost. The wounded are everywhere, their cries cutting through the eerie quiet in sharp, uneven waves. Some call out for medics, others just moan incoherently, cradling what's left of an arm or a leg. You spot a man labouring to tie a makeshift tourniquet around his thigh, his fingers trembling too hard to knot the fabric properly. Somehow, even now, there are medics scrambling across the sands, stepping over bodies, dodging obstacles, lugging impossibly heavy gear. They crouch by soldiers who seem beyond saving, offering a few last moments of comfort or desperately applying bandages to wounds that look more like open craters. One medic drops down near a man whose chest is covered in blood and starts chest compressions right there in the sand, even as debris rains down from a nearby explosion. Most medics didn't carry weapons. They had nothing but their helmets and armbands to protect them, as if that thin red cross would stop a sniper's bullet. For some it didn't. The price of this victory is sprawling on every inch of the beach. The numbers are staggering. Out of the 156,000 soldiers who hit the beaches that morning, thousands are now dead or wounded. Omaha Beach alone bled the most, over 2,000 men down in just a few hours. But these numbers don't explain the weight of it, do they? Numbers don't have faces. They don't tell you about the kid who froze just outside the landing craft, caught between the fear of moving forward and the certainty of death if he stayed still. They don't show you the way grown men cried on their bellies in the sand, calling for their mothers as gunfire shredded the air around them. Numbers don't explain the sheer heartbreak of soldiers passing by their friends' bodies on the way to the next objective, too locked into survival mode to do more than glance down. One of the most haunting sights is how some soldiers, even through the carnage, sift through the sands looking for their comrades. A man in his early 20s, missing his helmet, stumbles forward, clutching a piece of fabric torn from a friend's uniform that he's found near the edge of the water. He's too far gone to say much. He just wanders from body to body, flipping them over, searching for a face he knows. He doesn't find what he's looking for, but he keeps going anyway. It's not just about loss, it's the helplessness of it all. Feeling like the very people you trained with, laughed with, maybe even lived through other battles with, are just gone, stolen in seconds. And yet, somehow, through all of this, there are men who keep moving. You see them, not a lot of them, but enough, working to clear what's left of Nazi defences along the cliffs, pulses of gunfire still rattling out now and then. The bunkers that had once loomed over the beach, spitting endless streams of death, are eerily quiet now. the sand beneath them streaked with the soot and debris of Allied explosives. Small groups scale the seawall, planting flags where the Germans once had machine gun nests. From the beach below, it's hard to tell whether those moments feel triumphant or hollow. Maybe both. This victory, if you can call it that, marks the first break in Hitler's grip on Europe. And it wasn't just symbolic. This beach, this patch of earth that took so much blood to claim, becomes the foundation for liberating France. From here, Allied forces will push through Normandy, past hedgerows and occupied towns, toward Paris and beyond. But victory isn't something these soldiers can savour yet. They know this is only step one. Germany's war machine isn't going to crumble overnight. And while the Germans on these cliffs may have been outgunned today, reinforcements aren't far behind. They always are. Even the commanders standing on the beaches, watching the wreckage and bodies swirl in the tide, know better than to celebrate too soon. Eisenhower himself had prepared 2 speeches before the invasion began, one for victory and one for failure. The reality is, it doesn't feel like either. It feels like survival. When the smoke clears and the sand finally settles, what's left isn't triumph. It's exhaustion. It's the men sitting on the seawall with their heads in their hands, surrounded by comrades staring blankly at nothing. Some digging stale biscuits out of their packs like they might finally be hungry now that their adrenaline has burned out. For some there is relief, though it is almost impossible to separate it from the grief. Men who manage to stick with their units stumble through the remains, slapping each other on the shoulder or even laughing in bursts that sound more like panic than joy. "We lived," one private says simply, shaking his head like the words don't quite register. "God help me, we actually lived." But just as many sit in silence, their eyes still locked on the beach as if waiting for something to wake them from this nightmare. Not every soldier will let themselves feel the weight of this moment, not yet. They can't afford to. There's still movement on the horizon as tanks begin to roll up from the landing crafts that made it to shore later in the day. Orders will come soon, orders to move inland, to prepare for the next push. This fight didn't just secure a beach, it secured a foothold to take back an entire continent. That's what today was. The beginning. It feels strange, knowing so much could hinge on a moment that looked and felt like chaos. In time, history will mark this battle as a turning point, one that displayed the resilience of soldiers who were tested more brutally than most of us will ever comprehend. But looking around the beach now, there's no sense of history being made. There's only the here and now, and what's here is the cost. Because as the men begin dragging themselves uphill, away from the sands, they leave behind not just carnage and wreckage, but names. Names of friends, brothers, leaders, of soldiers who'll never see how this moment ripples outward. Soldiers who won't cheer when Paris falls, or who won't raise a glass when Berlin follows. For all the progress made today, none of it came free. It never does. And you know that deep down, no matter how far inland these men push, how many towns they liberate, how many victories follow, this beach is going to stay with them. The sights, the sounds, the losses, they'll carry them for the rest of their lives. For some, those memories will feel like scars, a reminder they survived something unimaginable. For others, they'll feel like ghosts, shadows of the men who were left behind. But at least now the beach is quiet. And for the first time that day, though it doesn't feel like it to anyone, it belongs to them. Why does D-Day still matter? That's a question worth asking, especially now, when the memories of World War II drift further and further into the rearview mirror. It might feel like ancient history, like something bound to textbooks and museum plaques. But once you strip away the layers of time, you're left with the story that's not about generals, maps, or strategies. It's about regular men. People who didn't ask for glory, didn't want their names etched into marble, and certainly didn't wake up dreaming of storming a beach where survival was a gamble. And yet they did it. They faced the impossible, not because they were fearless, but because someone had to. The courage it took to step off those boats is hard to imagine now. Think about it. These men weren't professional soldiers assembled from some elite warrior class. Many were shop clerks, farmers, factory workers, young guys who had barely lived their lives. They came from small towns and bustling cities, from families who packed them onto trains with promises of, "You'll be home by Christmas," before reality set in. These weren't hardened veterans. For the majority, this was their first combat experience, and their training, intense as it was during those grueling months before D-Day, never came close to replicating the cold brutality of this invasion. There was no drill sergeant yelling at them while machine gun bullets tore into the sand around them. There was no practice run for a reality this gruesome, and yet facing fear wasn't a choice for them. It wasn't as simple as fight or flight. There was no flight, no retreat. These men weren't just fighting for themselves or their units. They were fighting for something they couldn't quite touch, but knew mattered. A chance to reclaim Europe from Germany's iron grip. A chance to free men, women and children who were enduring atrocities under Nazi rule. They didn't see the big picture every second, but they didn't have to. Their role was simple, heartbreaking and terrifying. Make it through the carnage and pave the way for the next wave. When we remember D-Day, when we picture the films and the photos, it's so easy to overlook the human cost. The staggering numbers tend to smooth out individual stories into nameless statistics. But think about the weight of those statistics. Over 4,400 Allied soldiers dead just on that day. Behind every one of those lives was a promise, a family, a future stolen. You see the wooden crosses on Normandy's beaches, rows and rows of them, stretching farther than your eye can follow. Every cross means a man who never went home, a mother who never saw her son step off the train, a bride whose husband's last letter arrived weeks before she got the news. Take Peter Koenig, 22 years old, an army medic from Kansas. He didn't carry a gun on D-Day, just a bag of supplies and a heart so full of determination that he ran into the open again and again, risking everything to tend to the wounded. He saved dozens of lives that day, pulling men off the sand, shielding them with his own body when gunfire screamed overhead. When he was finally hit, no one left him behind. Soldiers who owed their lives to him dragged him to safety. And yet, Peter's story doesn't end happily. He succumbed to his injuries days later, never making it back to the farm his family worked so hard to maintain. His sister once reflected that he wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to do what was right. And what about William Bill Millin, a 21-year-old piper who hit the beaches armed with nothing but bagpipes and an unflinching sense of duty? His orders were to play, to rally scared men as they landed under fire. Against the backdrop of chaos and death, Millin marched up and down the sand in full view, playing Highland Laddie and The Road to the Isles. German snipers reportedly spared him, thinking he'd lost his mind. That's the kind of courage we're talking about here. The kind that keeps men inching forward, one note, one step at a time. These stories, and thousands like them, aren't just relics. They echo into the world we know today. What happened on June 6, 1944 wasn't just about battles or beachheads. It was about opening the door for freedom to push back. The impact of D-Day cascaded forward. The liberation of France, the march to Berlin, the eventual collapse of the Third Reich, it all started here. Those men, soaked in salt water and sand, bleeding in the surf, carried the first stones of a foundation that would rebuild an entire continent. But how often do we stop and think about what that foundation cost? It's not just the lives lost, it's the ripple effect of every man who didn't come home, a wife waiting by the window until the realization settles in, a son growing up without a father to teach him how to fix a broken fence or throw a baseball. A world changed not only by the victories won, but by the empty spaces left behind. The human cost isn't just something for history books, it's the shadow that history casts. And now, I want you to ask yourself something. Picture yourself there, not as an audience member watching war dramatized on a screen, but as one of them. Imagine the cold surf reaching up past your knees, the bark of machine gun fire shredding the air, the soldier in front of you falling before he gets 3 steps past the ramp. Could you have stepped forward? Could you have kept going when fear sat in your stomach like lead? Maybe you think you could. Maybe you're not so sure. But that's the point. None of us really know what we would have done, and none of us had to make that choice because they already did. Remembering D-Day isn't just about patriotism, it's about gratitude. It's about acknowledging that the lives we live today, the freedoms we enjoy without a second thought, are built on the backs of people who gave up everything for a world they hoped would be better. They didn't storm those beaches so we could forget them. They did it because they believed in something bigger than themselves, even if they couldn't quite see it in the heat of battle. So, the next time you see a black and white photo of a guy in a helmet on a beach, take a second and think about what it cost him to stand there. Think about the fear he swallowed, the pain he suffered, and the courage he found to push forward, even when it seemed impossible. And when you think about him, remember what he fought for, not glory or headlines, but the simple idea that some battles are worth fighting, even knowing you might not be around to celebrate the victory. We remember D-Day because it reminds us what humans are capable of in their darkest hours. It reminds us of bravery, of sacrifice, and of resilience. But we also remember it because it reminds us to never take those sacrifices for granted. It's not enough to build memorials or mark anniversaries. The best way to honour those men is to live the life they fought to give us, fully, freely, and with gratitude. So, take a moment, think about them, and don't forget. Because forgetting would be the only failure those men couldn't afford. D-Day wasn't just a battle. It was a testament to the raw courage of ordinary men. It showed us what humans can endure and overcome when the stakes are everything. The soldiers who faced that beach gave more than their lives. They gave future generations a chance to live freely. It's on us to remember that, to reflect on what they sacrificed, not as abstract figures, but as people with names, families, and dreams. So today, take a moment to honour them, share their stories, learn their history, and carry their memory forward. Because their bravery deserves more than silence. It deserves gratitude. Thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this stroll through history, and that this small piece of it will help you on your way to dreamland. Good night,